Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the 9th episode of the Backstory on Marketing. If you haven't already done so, please visit ProRelevant.com and sign up for all of these episodes and podcasts. I am the author of the upcoming book, The Post-COVID Marketing Machine, Prepare Your Team to Win. You can find more information on this book at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. Today, we'll be speaking with Josh Cherfoli. He is the Senior Director of Marketing and Digital Engagement at Georgia Aquarium. Josh directs all marketing, advertising, and interactive efforts for Georgia Aquarium. His responsibilities include the development and execution of all websites, digital properties, mobile apps, and digital media environments, which are designed to cultivate the highest quality user experience. He's proud of taking home many awards, including Effie, Webby, Max, Digital Edge 50, and others over his 20 plus years of traditional, interactive, and database marketing experience. Prior to joining Georgia Aquarium, Josh worked in the marketing departments of the Home Depot, Porsche Cars North America, and Porsche Financial Services. He earned his bachelor's degree in marketing from Michigan State University and earned his master's degree in communications from Purdue. He resides in Roswell, Georgia with his wife and their 4 children. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, thank you for having me here. And
I found this on the web.
I kind of think, that you got the wrong guy here because you weren't describing me for sure. You got somebody else's bio there, but thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's so good to have you. I must say, you've got 4 kids. They must think you are a rock star working at Georgia Aquarium. I mean, it must be awesome for them.
It's definitely a fun thing. I've got an endless number of requests from the kids to say, can they come to work with me? And every once in a while I can take them up on that offer because it is a fun venue to be able to bring them in and it's not a bad office location either. A couple of steps away from seeing some beluga whales or whale sharks and off we go. So it's a special place.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I've been down there a handful of times and it's something to it's awesome how it all comes together. But in any case, so tell us about yourself. What is your backstory on getting into marketing?
That's a really fun question, Guy. And I think for me it was really growing up in the Detroit area. If you've never been in the Detroit area, or maybe as a kid in the Detroit area, you're surrounded by things automotive. Anything that you turn around, there's a car part, something going on there. And as a kid, my dad was a merchandising and a marketing guy, first at American Motors and then Jeep and then Chrysler. And so if you kind of said like kids thinking their dads were rock stars, I knew my dad was a rock star at that point in time. And I was always fascinated when he would bring like the next year's car catalogs home. And so I would immediately run through that catalog and I would check every single image out. And then I would run out to the driveway and hold it up next to the car that he had in the driveway. And just to make sure, like, was it 100% and, what's new on this one and what's new on this one. And I think from that point forward, I was hooked in marketing and wanted to be part of this entire experience. And then I think, as I got older, I started to pay more attention to that art and the science and what the balance of marketing started to look like. And that really started to get me intrigued to understand, there's a lot of moving parts in terms of how this makes it happen. And so then while I was in college, I got an internship at an amazing company called Ross Roy Communications. And it was an independent agency back then, got folded into the BBDO Omnicom network over time. And while I was there, I knew I threw myself 100% into that role, and I wanted to know everything. And kind of thinking back on that, I probably was the biggest pain in can we swear on this? Is that all right? I was the biggest pain probably for every one of the guys in the agency, because I was that guy who was like, and how does this work? And what does this do? And probably that guy, you know, that was like, drove everybody crazy. But I was just in awe of what that machinery was and how that all worked. And just taking the pure concept of, we have an idea, and now at the end of the day or at the end of the week, it turned into something magical because of the machinery and the process of what those organizations did. So, you know, then I guess fast forward after, you know, a handful of years of growing and jumping up in the agency world, I got the opportunity to make that jump over to the corporate or the client side of the operation. And it was for a pretty amazing brand. I got the opportunity, again, like as a car guy, as a kid, you know, growing up in Detroit, I got the opportunity to come move down to Atlanta and work for Porsche Cars North America. And you know, I grew up as a kid. I had Porsches on my wall as posters. I was like, this is amazing. And so I guess that's my story of how I got into marketing.
Wow. Well, getting into Porsche and stuff like that, that's fantastic. I mean, and you're
Yeah,
right.
it was
We all had that stuff, you know, at home, the posters on the wall and whatever. So yeah, absolutely. Cars were, you know, that was such a big thing growing up, and then you being right in the middle of it. Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. And it was a funny kind of just anecdote story. I remember having the conversation with my wife when I started the interview process with Porsche, and you know, it felt like it was becoming a reality. And she made me promise that I wasn't doing it just because of the company car opportunity. And I said, maybe. Maybe.
All right, well, let's move away from cars and over to fish.
Okay. Cars to fish. We can do that.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be above ground. Now we're going to be below ground. So, so tell us about Georgia Aquarium. You know, one of the things in your bio was about customer experience, and you know, and that nowadays is such a huge part of the business and certainly a big part of marketing.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, starting off like a little bit. Yeah, you said, you know, I transitioned from all things above ground to now things that are below ground, and at Georgia Aquarium, like, talk about a really cool brand, right? Like this is something that's really special. So I'm absolutely honored to be part of the aquarium team. And you know, you talked about it a little bit in my bio, so I don't need to get into it. But yeah, I have the opportunity to direct all of the marketing advertising for the aquarium. You know, as we drive down the road, you mentioned my kids, you know, we'll drive down the road and they'll see the billboards on the side of the road, and they're like, did you do that one? Yeah, I guess we, you know, I had a part in that one. So you know, but in short, I guess it's, you know, I look at my role is the ability to generate demand and excitement for people to want to come to the aquarium. And that's really what I look at. How do we make the programs and make the advertising and make the, you know, it enticing for somebody who want to come to the aquarium, and then really fulfill that user experience. So, you know, it's a magical place when you get there. So make sure that experience all the way through fulfills that promise, and is just, you know, we're excited to get into the building. You would get them there, and now let the magic of what the aquarium does really bring that home.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It is such a magical place. And I scuba dive and just getting underwater, but then you'd be able to see it right in front of you like that without having to worry about your air and whatever. And seeing animals, you know, when you're scuba diving, it's kind of like a, you know, all luck as to whether you get to see anything of interest. And here they are, these beluga whales and the sharks and the everything. It's just incredible.
It is pretty incredible. One thing that is so, if you think about like you said, that kind of that scuba dive opportunity, you know, we're 500 miles from the nearest ocean, and we have whale sharks, you know, like any animal you could ever imagine is here in downtown Atlanta, which is an amazing thing just from a guest to experience. But we actually have the opportunity with our swim programs and our dive programs that you can go and dive with those whale sharks. And you nailed it, is that if you were to go out on the ocean and book a dive tour or something like that, you might see some animals. You know that when you book the dive program at the aquarium, you're gonna see whale sharks, you're gonna see manta rays, you're going to see, like, you will see this, and you will see them in an up close and an amazing fashion. And it's, if you haven't done it, Guy, we'll figure this out. We need to put you in the water somehow.
I'm ready.
Because it's an amazing experience, that's for
I
sure.
am definitely ready. And it's funny, I had both of my sons, I got them certified, and one now is a marine biologist, and he loves diving. He's like at the super advanced, whatever it is, level. And so, yeah, we'll definitely have to, I got to show him up that I can do some cool stuff too.
Exactly. See, we got to get you on the cool dad of the year trophies.
Well, that would be great. I'm ready. So, well, it's funny, the working for a venue and where your product is the venue, and then all of a sudden COVID hits and you're shut down. And so, man, oh man, 2 years ago. So tell us what happened, and tell us how you guys came out of it.
Yeah, talk about I don't even know the words to describe it, but talk about, a showstopper. It was challenging to use probably the most politically correct term, that's not going to get it censored. It was a massive challenge for us. And I think we all know the stories, right? We went into this thinking it was 2 weeks and we'll be good. And then all of a sudden it was 2 years. This is something maybe a lot of people don't understand, is that the aquarium is a nonprofit organization. And we don't have, subsidies coming from government organizations or other donations. We rely really on our ticket revenue, our general admission revenue, to keep the lights on and to keep the building moving and to keep the animals healthy, all of the things that go with running an aquarium. So with being shut down for 3 months without having guests coming in the building or buying tickets, you have zero revenue. And it was a massive challenge to figure out how to continue to fund the operation with no revenue coming in, because we really, like I said, we rely on that ticket sales for the daily operation. That forced us to get really creative in how do we stay relevant for the customer and make sure that we are something that we're still top of mind for people to think about. One of the things that we did right out of the gate, we leaned into the aspects of the aquarium that could be delivered remotely. Like you said, this is a venue. This is a place where people come to interact with us. And so what could we isolate and tease apart to be able to deliver in a virtual or in a remote fashion? And one of the things that came first was our webcams. And our webcams became a conduit for people to still continue to experience the website. And we saw amazing traffic spikes on our webcams that first Friday, that first Saturday in March, years ago when we all shut down. People leaned into our webcams, and they wanted us to see what was going on, and everyone needed that escape. Everyone wanted to be part of something to kind of experience normalcy, if you will. So we leaned into those webcams, and we delivered that as a way to just stay relevant for people, stay connected, stay top of mind. And then we leaned into it, and we started to create some other things like virtual tours. So we had teams in the building because we still had to have our daily operations. We were taking care of the animals and all of the things that go with that. So we started filming virtual tours, and we started giving people the opportunity to still experience the aquarium gallery by gallery through a virtual tour. It was a guided tour. And so those were things that we did to try to keep people engaged. And the challenge for us on the marketing team was really, like, just that, how do we stay relevant and make people want to continue to return and anticipate that eventual return to the building? So we used all of the good tools and engagements to be able to get people back and just want to care about the aquarium still.
Yeah, I could imagine, if you're a kid or even an adult and, you got kids or the family and you're stuck at home and go into the webcams and actually seeing what's going on down there would be a very good way to get out of the house without actually having to get out of the house. So very
Exactly.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we also did, part of the one of the learnings that we started to uncover was also the connectivity to all of the kids and the students who were now kind of in the same boat as the rest of the world, where they were still being, asked to go into, do schoolwork, but they were all doing it virtually. And so we created a ton, and I mean a ton, of virtual learning tools that teachers and students could take advantage of to kind of fill curriculum gaps that they were having. And the webcams was one of those things where a teacher could put the webcams on and stream our webcams for all of her dispersed students, his or her dispersed students, throughout the course of the day. So all of those elements we created, and I really just lightly touched on the education part of it, but we have a full education team at the aquarium that's focused on how do we deliver STEAM curriculum back to students. And so using all of those tools, we were able to do that virtually as well. And that I think was a really, really important aspect for us to stay relevant and overcome some of those challenges of not having people in the building.
Yeah. So, well, that must have had a lot of impact on your metrics, COVID, I mean, and then, so have you been able to get back to where you were pre-COVID in terms of ticket sales, or are you still climbing up out of that?
We've been, knock on wood, we have been very fortunate. And when we kind of look at ticket sales and some of those KPIs or metrics, those at this moment, the top metric that we look at is attendance. And so that's really when we measure attendance and success, we have been to a point where we've recovered and we're back to where we were seeing our numbers in 2019, prior to the pandemic. So it's, we've been very fortunate to have probably, primed the pump and filled the funnel up, the top part of the funnel up while we were closed and while people were still doing distance and remote. And then when we were able to open the doors and the world starts to come back to life, the attendance figures came back. And we've been able to do that even in a limited attendance model, because we still are trying to honor the idea that there's some uncomfortableness, if you will. I don't even have the word, but we'll go with it. That people, maybe don't want to be shoulder to shoulder with a ton of people still. And so we've been operating on this limited attendance model where we're trying to maximize that daily attendance so that we can hit the revenue targets that we need, but also give enough of an experience that people are happy to still come to the aquarium and can still see what they want to see. So when we look at like that booking pace throughout the day, we look at opportunities when we're trying to fill in the gaps. Like, is there a spot at 9 o'clock in the morning that maybe we could have a couple more tickets because we have a deficiency in sales there and the building's empty, or maybe at the end of the day as we get closer to close time, we look for those patterns and those purchasing either day to day or week over week. And sometimes we even look at it, like I said, hour to hour, to find where we can have optimizations to kind of move some of those needles. But that's really what we're tracking right now and how we measure an overall, the biggest metric of success is people through the door. And we've recovered, like I said, to some extent.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's not an easy task. So are you actually taking reservations for different time slots during the day? Is that how you're doing that?
Absolutely. when we first reopened from the pandemic, 100% of ticket sales were online through our website. So we kind of look at, or at least I do, I look at the website georgiaaquarium.org as an e-commerce engine. It's an e-commerce function for the aquarium, and when we reopened with very finite guidelines of how many people could be in the building, and so we built the tools in the back end to push people into time slot reservations. And they were booked and bucketed so that we could really pace people through the building. As things started to open up, we've been able to expand the range of times that are available and then the number of time slots that we go. But to that exact question, yes, when someone comes to the aquarium and they purchase their ticket, we ask them first, when do they want to come, which day of the week, and then we present them, after we know how many tickets they want, we present them with which time slot that they're going to be, that they want to come into. And it's looking at real-time inventory that we have available. So right now, it's whatever time it is, you can only look at time slots from this point forward. And if there's time slots at lunchtime that are already full, you might have to be purchasing out at 3 p.m. or something along those lines.
So how do you handle walk-up then? Or do you not allow any walk-up, random walk-up or whatever, or do you already adjust for that in your availability of the time slots?
So now we account for a walk-up ticket sale through our kiosks. So we have on-site kiosks, self-service kind of touchscreen kiosks. The inventory that's allocated to those kiosks is balanced with our online inventory. So we had some tickets to be able to accommodate it. But there's certainly an instance where someone were to walk up and expect to come in the building right now, there might not be a time slot for them. So they might see the next available time slot on that kiosk is an hour into the future. So that's why we've been trying to still push people. For the best experience, you want to go to the website, so that way you can really plan your visit. But we know things change and opportunities happen, and someone might want to walk up. So we accommodate the walk-up sale in that fashion. But it's an interesting. I'm definitely not a mathematician, but it's an interesting math problem that we have in terms of how many do we allocate for the online within each time slot, and how many are set aside for the kiosks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that balance of the two has got to be pretty tough. And it's almost like you're, I guess, two things. One of them, it's now almost revenue management, kind of like booking tickets on a plane or in a hotel, and not partially, potentially overbooking, or maybe not, but then being able to somehow accommodate that. And then secondly, in your messaging, you don't want to have too many people showing up and being totally disappointed and then not even want to come back because I can't get a space there. So that it had to have also changed your marketing messaging and how you communicated that to your market.
Yeah, I think that was you nailed it. And we really changed when we first came out of, we maybe backing up a moment, we were fortunate enough to have our senior leadership team all on board with the idea that we can't pause marketing. We can't shut marketing down during the pandemic. And we were able to make that widely understood throughout the building, that if we were to do that, even though it might save us a couple of dollars, it would be disastrous in terms of our ability to try to recover from it. So having that messaging still ongoing through the pandemic while we were closed gave us the ability to start to push that narrative of and that understanding that book online and only available online gave us that ability to really direct people to that and start to set that expectation that your tickets this is the best avenue to get into the building. And had we not done that, I don't even want to think about what kind of position we'd be in. It'd be pretty, I think.
Yeah, well, and also to advertise when you're closed or during the time that you're closed with an uncertain open date, even that's really tough to, and especially when you got no revenue coming in and yet you're sending money out the door on something that is so uncertain moving forward. Man, good for your leadership team that they really saw the value in that.
Yeah, I was really happy that that everybody was on board with that, because you're right. It was it would have been would have been in a bad place for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm a data guy, so I got to ask some questions about data. So what did how did your data and your marketing data and that change as you moved from mid COVID and now into hopefully into post COVID?
So I guess from a data standpoint, we still have the same data sets, if you will, and we went kind of just from an evaluation or an understanding of what we were looking at. We went from what we would typically be looking at is that year-over-year data, and we were starting to look at just day-over-day data. So instead of saying, how did I compare to last year, which is what we would have always done, it was an irrelevant discussion. So we moved that evaluation perspective to that day over day. And as long as we were continuing to look at that day over day, were we improving each day? And then we were able to stretch that from a day to day to a day to week, a week to week, month to month. And as we started to get more traction in there, every time we moved the needle incrementally up in terms of our conversion rates and our click-through rates and our total visits, all of the digital metrics that are coming through that e-commerce engine, we were able to continue to refine and optimize the tool to say, let's look at where the button placement is. Let's refine that user flow in terms of how people are navigating through that shopping cart and that purchasing process. So looking for all of those incremental optimizations as that data was telling us, let's move this forward, And our benchmark was, are we doing better than the day before? Are we continuing to do better than we did? And now we're at the point in time where we've come through all of that cycle, and I can now go back to kind of that year-over-year comparison. So is this day in April, or whatever day we're in?
Yeah.
Is this day consistent with the same time frame last year? And so now we're back to that. Let's look for broader tactics and broader anomalies, if you will.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I would imagine, and I was thinking about this as you were talking, that when you're saying day over day, you have weekends versus weekdays, and two things. I guess one is being fully where all your reservations are booked on the weekends, but may not be on the weekdays. And I don't know if that's the case or not. But then looking day over day is you also have to look at not only day over day, but then the week comparables, and then also adjusting for holidays and things like that, because they fall on different days.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those aspects are part of that evaluation criteria. And when does Easter fall on a certain day of the week? Where does it fall in the mix compared to a spring break time frame? 4th of July, all of those holidays move throughout the day. So it becomes a challenge of where are we putting the resources to book ourselves in? And, we were really, really excited when we started to see sold out days. So we had, when we started to reopen, we were sold out on the weekends. There was no more tickets available, which, a pessimist might tell us, well, you should have sold more tickets. you left revenue on the table. But that back to that customer experience concept of, it was the right decision to limit that so that the experience was beneficial for people, and letting people run through that. And then back to kind of the data, what are the customer expectations and what's resonating with the customer? We have a really great feedback loop that we get from our customers, and we look at that on a daily basis. What is our net promoter score? Where are we resonating with individual customers? Are they giving us 5-star reviews? Are they giving us 1-star reviews? What aspect of that review do we need to focus in on? Was it, I couldn't find the bathroom. I couldn't find, the parking was, any number of issues. We see that on a daily basis, and then we can go back in and address where we can. So balancing that act of, what does the attendance look like? What does the revenue look like? How are we converting people? How are we moving people forward? And then how does that balance with the customer experience? And boxing that all together is a really critical piece for us.
Well, and then you're right. You know, that balancing of experience versus your marketing strategy and your communications. And, you know, I really like that you spent the time while you were closed to start to set those expectations and, you know, to really move to a reservation based versus just a random walk up based. And that really, you know, that's a big change. And, you know, kudos to you that you got it. Sounds like you really got it right. And it's really functioning very well.
I'm not going to take anything for granted, but we're in a good spot right now. And I would never say that we got it right, because we're continuing to optimize, but we're in a really good spot. We're in a good spot where we're at. So
yeah.
Maybe a little superstitious guy.
All right, I want to ask. So okay, so you didn't do a good job, but you're always improving.
All right, I'll take that.
Continual improvement is part of measurement. So fantastic. Yeah. So how about your you know, marketing ROI? How have you seen that recover? And you know, now as you're actually getting revenue and you can tie it to your media and your media activities, how are things going that way?
All the metrics that we're seeing from our advertising and our paid engagements, you know, our display, banner, search, all of those, we have an extremely positive ROI on it. And we've been, I think part of that really comes back to we set that stage for ourselves to be successful by having people engage with our web content, and then priming ourselves to be able to do remarketing activities back out to them post engagement. Have they visited the website? Did they look at the webcams? And then really setting an expectation for people. So the engagement with the aquarium wasn't a surprise for us or for them. And so it made it a lot easier for us to have that secondary contact and that remarketing effort with them. So yeah, we've been seeing great ROAS, great ROI on all of our marketing efforts. And even to the idea that we were really almost 100% digital in terms of our ad space, where we were only display and only search, with the exception of our out-of-home engagements, the billboards. We leaned into the idea that TV and video and radio still works for us. So we're looking at that as a holistic set in terms of our pure marketing message, is that all of those activities work together to reach and resonate with the consumer. So, you know, in the past where we were able to, I say we're 100% digital and it's a great thing. I can't say we're 100% digital anymore, but we've added the elements to the marketing mix to give us that additional presence and to let people see, like, you know, seeing aspects of the aquarium on your TV from your living room, and it maybe giving you that moment of pause while you're seeing all of the other advertising and news products and things that are on the TV. Maybe there's a moment of solace and there's a moment of real that happens when people kind of see our ad on the TV. Yeah.
Well, and there's no question that balancing, I mean, even balancing the digital media platforms amongst themselves, but balancing then the traditional and the digital is definitely a challenge. And that's one of the things that we try and, you know, help our clients with, because there's clearly interplay between the traditional overlaid over the digital, and then, you know, the top of the funnel digital versus the bottom of the funnel digital. So yeah, that's definitely an area of good topic anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely one that, you know, it's some folks might say it's, you know, it's kind of marketing 101 kind of things, but you put your message out there where the consumers are going to be wanting to see it, right? Or where your consumers are engaged in it. So let's take that opportunity to engage them. And we know that there's plenty of people who are, you know, who are on the internet and using web content. We can be available to them. Search is absolutely, like, you know, table stakes, right? Like, we're there, but let's give them the ability, you know, if they're streaming services, we can be on those streaming services. We can be on mobile. We can be on desktop. We can be on, that large, you probably got a 90-inch, TV screen in your family room, like all sorts of good stuff. So we want to,
one on my desk here. This is my monitor on my desk.
It's a good space though.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but one thing too, it's interesting, you talk about search, and search is a tricky beast because it's kind of the response mechanism. It's a dependent kind of a media channel. And we were just talking about this with one of our other clients. You've got kind of people that just go to search because they want to have something to do. And then you have people that are triggered to go to search based on advertising. And that advertising could be you or it could be somebody else. And then they go to search. And then the problem is now you got, 3 or 4 different options there in terms of being paid search for us or paid search for the competition, organic search for us, and then organic search for the competition. And to get that balance right is I think I don't think too many companies have actually been able to really do that very successfully.
Yeah, it is a balancing act for sure. And I think you started to allude to it. There's a lot of art that balances that science of where, what is the right spend level and what is the right messaging to be able to make sure that those algorithms are pushing your content higher up in the search return. Because without that, you're paying way too much money to try to get yourself at the top of the list, when I can balance organic and paid on that same search results page and probably drive even more effective traffic. Because if it's an organic result, our people now trained to kind of skip through the ad content and look for the organic result. So let's make sure that the site itself is optimized and is pinging on all those keywords. And we've got a really fortunate experience with the website because we have so much scientific content. We have animal guides for every one of the animals that are on the page or on the website. So we have that ability for somebody who is just searching, if they typed in the scientific name for whale shark, I'm hoping that our page shows up near the top of the list. So if it's a kid doing a research project for school or somebody who's just fascinated with whale sharks, I want the Georgia Aquarium's whale shark page to be at the top of the list, and then drive them into an experience that's going to be more fulfilling than just I did my research, but I can now understand what the aquarium's doing for research and conservation and to support the animals and to support those whale sharks. So we really start to paint that big picture for people from that, that simple search term.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of like more on the brand as opposed to and building the brand and the brand equity as opposed to trying to get people to move down the funnel and convert today. So very, very, very interesting. Yeah,
it is an interesting, and I think it's a tricky conversation to have from an ads standpoint to say, if we're measuring an ROI or a ROAS type of an experience, it's okay to just let people engage in your content, and not have to have that transaction happen. So if we're seeing conversion rates which are fantastic for us, could they be better? Of course, but is it working for us? Because are we fulfilling other needs in terms of research and education and just that brand promise? Are we building a brand while we're creating that experience for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So well, let me change this topic here real quick, and then we'll close out. You are a part-time marketing instructor. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know what got in my head that I was like, I think I could do this. I think I wanted to be one of those cool professors that had the sleeves, and that walked around campus with a pipe or something. But yeah, I thought it would be a fun thing to kind of do. And so I, every once in a while I'll dabble in doing some part-time marketing instruction. And yeah, it's interesting to kind of hear from students and kind of demonstrate the work that we can do and how all of that textbook stuff that people are seeing really comes to life in terms of, the real world, what we're doing, at Georgia Aquarium, how that relates to the concepts that are being taught in the coursework. So bringing that, that real life example to a conversation, if I have 30 students on a Zoom call, I can bring that real life example from either my current experiences or past experiences and really just bring it to life for people. And they understand, real world examples as opposed to, a case study that might or might not be, in that textbook.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I'm kind of like you. I do some teaching over at Emory once a semester for like 3 different classes one day, and one of the things that my friend who is the professor of that course, one of the things that we do is that we're not only bringing the experiential side and a real life case study, but we're also bringing the most modern, or as close to the most modern techniques or whatever that are out there, as opposed to, and nothing wrong with the professor. I mean, you can read a lot, but it's not the same as actually doing and then explaining it. So it it does offer a whole lot more value to the students to get that online life, real life kind of experience.
I agree 100%. Like that is, that real life experience and being able to connect the dots. You can almost sometimes, feel that light bulb moment where it can, it crosses over all the right synapses and it's there for the students and it goes off. And then selfishly too, it helps. I think, I don't know, maybe you share a similar experience, Guy, but it helps me kind of put all of the right pieces in place, because if I can explain it in a way that now clicks with a student, then that means that I've got it locked in. And then how can we continue to move it forward? So I think it helps me continue to grow as a marketer as well, and understand, what are the challenges that they're seeing, or what is their experiences in kind of coming into this, because I will never say that I've got all the answers, but I can connect some of those real and relevant experiences to the back end there.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And even when I'm putting the slides together and or updating the slides or whatever, I realize, that's how you explain this. And then you get in there and you're actually talking about it. Then you go, another aha moment comes up where that you go, no, I should have explained it that way, and it would have been, that much more clear.
Yeah, I think that, it might be cliche, but I think there is instances where I'm learning more from the students and from being part of that bigger dialogue than I'm probably in providing into the dialogue. And so that was a really interesting kind of, and a happy accident, if you will, as it kind of comes out of that dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I definitely agree with that, and have definitely seen that. And I used to do a lot of teaching and a lot more, and it really does get you to be able to explain things so much better. So, well, listen, anything else that we left off that you'd like to mention, or?
I mean, we could talk about beer. We could talk about wine. I can't think of anything else that's kind of hanging out there that we didn't address. But I'm game if you've got other questions or other thoughts you want to hit.
No, I think that's it. We're about out of time, and
Okay.
I hate to say it, I could probably go on for another hour, because I could. It's so hard to get into to limit the topic and then be able to cover a certain level versus the depth that you can go into. But anyway, yeah. So, well, thank you so much, and really, the Georgia Aquarium is such a venue, and then to like for you to be able to be part of the marketing, it's as you mentioned, it must be really exciting and exciting for your kids. So
it's a true honor to be able to be part of the team for such an amazing brand, and I've been blessed and fortunate to work for amazing companies over the course of my career. So it's an honor, and then just to have the ability to talk to you in this forum, Guy, like it's been fantastic. So I appreciate you making some time for me to just kind of have this conversation. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you for participating. And with that, then let me close out. So for everybody, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on marketing. Please visit marketingmachine.prorelevant.com to download the first chapter of my book and other valuable excerpts. And if you get a chance, please also rate the podcast with 5 stars. And definitely go to georgiaaquarium.org and see all the really, really cool stuff that is out there at Georgia Aquarium. Thank you so much, Josh. Thank you.
Thanks, Guy. Appreciate it.